Balin, would you like to begin the meeting and I can try to get in touch with Director Boatwright?
Were you addressing me? I'm sorry.
Yes, would you like to begin the meeting and I can try to get in touch with Director Boatwright?
Sure. Thank you. That would be great. Okay, and I'm clear to all systems go for me to begin?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the regular board meeting of January 25th, 2022 to order. Melissa, will you please do the roll call, please?
Okay. Director Balin?
Here.
Director Boatwright? Director Kearns?
Here.
Director Murphy?
Here.
Director Ringen?
Here.
Okay, we currently have 4 directors present, and I will try to get in touch with Director Boatwright.
Thank you. Well, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I invite you all to put yourselves on mute while I salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. Okay, at this time, I will open up the public forum, and we would like to welcome the members of the public who have taken the time to attend this meeting and provide comments on matters related to district business. Any member of the public may address the board relating to any matter within the board's jurisdiction. This need not be related to any item on the agenda. However, the board cannot act on an item unless it was noticed on the agenda. Persons speaking during the public comment will be limited to 5 minutes, or depending on the number of persons wishing to speak, it may be reduced to allow all members of the public the opportunity to address the board. So, Corey, at this time, is there any member of the public that would like to address the board?
Not that is indicating at the moment. I don't see no.
Okay, thank you. All right, then that will conclude our public forum, and we will bring it to consent calendar. And Melissa, will you please read the 2 items?
Okay, item number 1, minutes of the regular board meeting of January 11th, 2022, and item number 2, investment report as of December 31st, 2021.
Thank you. At this time, is there any director that would like to pull one of these items or both items to discuss? Just double checking. Corey, do you see any director?
I do not, no.
Anybody? Thank you. Is there any member of the public that wishes to discuss either of these items?
Not that's indicating no.
Thank you. Then I will call for a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any public? Just making sure. Okay. Then Melissa, will you please call for the vote?
Okay, Director Balin?
Aye.
Director Boatwright? Still absent? Okay. Director Kearns?
Aye.
Director Murphy?
Aye.
Director Ringen?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0 with Director Boatwright absent.
Thank you. All right, our next item is our regular business. And Melissa, would you please read the first item?
Okay, presentation by Redistricting Services, 2020 Census Results District Profiles.
Okay, good morning. We have a guest here, Matt Rexroad of Redistrict Insight Services. He's here to provide us some information as we begin to transfer from at-large to by division elections. So, Matt, can introduce yourself and take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's nice to meet you all in person. I've had the privilege of driving up there and talking to Melissa and Don in person, but haven't had the chance to meet all of you. On my team, we have Eddie Harity, who's not on his camera right now, but he's listening in for any sort of guidance you can provide us in terms of the way you might like to see this play out. And then Fabian Valdez Jr. is joining us today as well. He's also part of my team. And so you see those new names on there that aren't familiar to you. That's why they're here to help us through this process. And so we do redistricting all over the country. We just finished the state of New York for their independent redistricting commission. Their independent commission just dissolved at the end, but we just finished California's process as well, more as observers as opposed to official line drawers. And we're working on projects all over the state of California as special districts, school districts, and cities go to redistricting for the rest of this year. So Don, do you just want me to go into my presentation? Is that what you prefer, or how would you like this to play out? You're muted, Don.
Yeah. Yes, I think that'd be great. I got a question for you. Would you like us to raise our hands if we have questions anytime, or would you rather us get through the presentation?
You know, I'm prepared to take them at any time. My only worry is sometimes when I share my screen, I can't necessarily see the raised hands on the Zoom feature. So if you just want to call out, I'm ready. And if I don't know the answer, I'm sure Fabian or Eddie will.
Okay, great. Yeah, Corey will pay attention to people raising their hands. So thank you.
Great.
Then I'm gonna share my screen, so you all can see this. Can everyone see that? Okay. So basically today's we're required to because you are not redistricting but districting, there's kind of a unique process that you all have to go through, or we have to go through together. And as we're going through this, sometimes I will use the term redistricting, and I do understand that for you all, it is your first districting. Many of the jurisdictions we're dealing with are redistricting, but both yesterday and today we have we're working with folks who are doing districting for the first time. And so in the overwhelming theme of any sort of redistricting or redistricting process is to make sure we have a very open and transparent process so members of the public can observe this process, participate in it, comment on it, and be involved in this process as these lines are drawn. And so for the next two meetings, they may seem a little redundant, but the law requires us to go through and basically cover redistricting for the first two meetings without any sample maps to start with. But usually the reality is that a lot of times and when we do this around the state, what really gets people involved is when we start putting lines on a map for the districts. That's when people really start to understand where the differences are. And that's what usually sparks a lot of enthusiasm. Last night I was down in Visalia, and we had exactly 3 people show up. There's a special hospital special district. They told me that they had only had 3 people attend their meeting and over many, many years prior to that, but 3 showed up last night, and that's not uncommon. So anyway, just really quickly, the difference between, so we're all talking about kind of the same definitions. At large elections, which is what you all are used to, is when people vote throughout the entire district, your current system. And district elections are where only, in your case, 5 different districts people vote for and represent only those individual entities, 1/5 of the overall boundary of the jurisdiction. So some people ask, well, why district elections? And I'm not here to advocate for or against district elections, but for those people who like district elections, the generally 4 themes that they point to are geographic diversity, to make sure that people represent the broad geographic diversity of the jurisdiction. I know in a prior life, I was the mayor of Woodland, California, where I live now. And in my city, all the city council members lived within about a 1/4 mile of each other. And so that's not necessarily uncommon when we go into these first districting, we go through this districting process where elected officials often live close to each other. The overwhelming view of district elections, why they're favored in California and have been by the legislature and most elected bodies, is that they believe that there's increased minority representation because Historically disadvantaged minorities have a better opportunity to be able to serve on government bodies with district elections. The other thing is that there's lower barriers to entry. Your special district is relatively small, but we work with special districts that have over 1 million people in them. And so the barriers to entry in running a political campaign in a district with a much smaller population is easier for people to get involved in. And then there's obviously the thought that since elected officials represent fewer people, they are then closer to them and are better able to represent them. Want to talk briefly about the California Voting Rights Act, which is oftentimes the provisions of it are what often cause special districts, cities, school districts to go to district elections. And the California Voting Rights Act is not the Federal Voting Rights Act. And I need to make that distinction. Last night, I had a lot of questions at this forum in Visalia about the differences between the two. But California Voting Rights Act is a piece of legislation passed by the legislature and signed by the governor in Sacramento that basically says if you can show any racially polarized voting in an area, the remedy is to go to district elections. And that remedy may not exactly fix some of the issues, but that is the remedy that's provided by law. And so and I will tell you that I'm unaware so far of any jurisdiction in California that has been able to say we don't have any racially polarized voting at all. The standard is very, very low that was provided by the legislature. And so, and it's a fair criticism, I believe, of the law to be able to say, well, district elections doesn't solve racially polarized voting. And that's true, but that's the remedy that was provided by the legislature. And a lot of special districts that we've been working with are unhappy about the law, but they still are complying with the overall effort to go to district elections. So in terms of what is districting or redistricting in this case, or in your case, districting, you are not subject to Prop 11 and Prop 20 or the California Fair Maps Act, which applies to cities and counties as they go through districting and redistricting. But you do need to understand that because the statewide commission was established in California about 11 years ago and operated, that's kind of an expectation by the public now as these efforts to districting and redistricting have a more open and transparent process, that it's not done behind closed doors, that it's in public meetings and the public can be involved. And people say, well, that doesn't apply to us, Matt, we're a special district. You're right. But the expectation of the public, by the media, by most of your constituents would be that this process would be open and out front where everyone can observe it and comment on it. Oftentimes, I just show this slide because I get folks who use redistricting or reapportionment interchangeably, and they are not the same thing. As you go through your process, well, redistricting is just simply, or districting is simply drawing the lines within a jurisdiction. But reapportionment is apportioning members of Congress among the different states. It happens very quickly after the census data is done. But in the congressional delegation has overall or the members of the House of Representatives, there's 435 of them. After the Census Bureau finishes their work, they apportion the members of Congress among the different states. You're not going to do that here. When we finish this process, you're going to have 5 members just like you had before. You're not going to have a 7th or a 9th or a 12th or anything like that. It's going to be 5. We're just drawing district lines within your current number of board seats. I throw this slide up because it's a famous cartoon of that was called the gerrymander and Governor Geary in Massachusetts. This is a political cartoon that was used to mock the shape of a district many years ago. And so oftentimes that's part of the redistricting lore. So that's kind of just a broad overview. And now I want to talk generally about the principles of redistricting, and some which are very important to you and apply to your specific set of circumstances, some of which aren't so important. But the overall principle of redistricting is that you're seeking population equality. So each of the districts that are drawn of the 5 are going to have population equality, meaning with the principle of one person, one vote, they'll all have a population balance. One district won't have 100 people and another won't have 10,000. They will be equally balanced so that each person has some sort of or close to equal representation. The other issue is the Federal Voting Rights Act. And this is a big issue in a lot of the valley towns in California and Southern California. It is not so much an issue for you, and I'll explain that a little bit later. Then we have communities of interest, which is the third principle and redistricting that's often considered. And this is communities of interest is all things to all people. Some people will argue about being close to dog parks or water facilities or school district boundaries. It can be anything. And the reality is that nobody's wrong. They have their own ideas of communities of interest. Could be the valley floor with certain types of row crop agriculture or tourist areas, could be anything. But people will come in, if we get a lot of comments on this, most always they involved, this is my community of interest. I want to be in the same district as Don because we live in a similar neighborhood and we should be together, as opposed to we don't want to be like those other people over there because they live in a different type of community. And so that's what you'll hear a lot of comments on. The other two issues are uniquely applicable to you all because of your district boundaries in terms of their basically geography of your county. There's the issue of compactness, and compactness hasn't been an issue much around California because most of the time that we're not drawing exact squares and circles, but generally the districts are close. It's not a long elongated feature. It's generally a relatively round shape or square shape. You might have some districts that end up looking a little differently just because of your borders. And then finally, contiguity. And contiguity can also be an issue in rural parts of California because oftentimes cities will have incorporated islands where their sewer treatment plant might be, or it might be because some piece of non-contiguous land is part of a city. And so we need to make sure that it's not only contiguous, it can't be point contiguous unless it's unavoidable, meaning just one point touches, but we also want to make sure that it's functionally contiguous. So you wouldn't separate people by mountain ranges or anything like that. So just really quickly to go through these, and a couple of them are more important, and I'll kind of move through the Voting Rights Act quickly, that stuff quickly, because it's not necessarily applicable to you. But in my hypothetical here regarding population equality, we have a community of 100,000 people. You are not required to have exact population equality. In California, you do for Congress, down to one single person deviation out of the 760,000 people that are each congressional district, it's down to one person. As special districts and city councils and boards of supervisors, you get whatever the mean is. So in our case, with 100,000 people in 5 districts, the mean would be 20,000 people per district. You get 5% on either side of that mean. So in this case, you would the districts have to be between 19,000 and 21,000. That would be a population deviation of 10%, 5 on either side. So in my example here, this is completely hypothetical, but if in this plan for our purposes, for Fabian and Eddie and I, we would look at this and we would say the total population deviation, District 1 has 21,000 people with a deviation of 5%. District 4 has a population deviation of negative 3.75%. So we would say the total deviation is 8.75% for this plan. That is good. It's legal, but the reality is if it's going to be higher, closer to 10, you've got to have a good reason for it. And the example that is probably best for people to kind of understand is the county of Butte County, after the Paradise Fire, they had some huge devastation in that community. Well, they undercounted that supervisorial district in Butte County for a really good reason. They had all those people who moved out of there very quickly. And so they undercounted that district. It was much lower in population than the others because they believe that the census count that was done in April 1st of 2020, that's the date for all of our census data, Paradise was undercounted. So they assumed that there's actually more people that will intend to live there, do live there. And so they undercounted that. But in the end, we have to use the census data to be able to measure population equality. The other part of this is for population equality is the numbers that we use are from the census data. We don't use voter registration data. We don't use anything. Population equality is based on every living heartbeat in an area, whether it be people under the age of 18, whether they're citizens of the United States or not, doesn't matter. Are they residents of that area and do they have a heartbeat? That's what counts for population equality. I already talked about this largely for using people, not citizens or voter registration. We're looking for, this point here is about the idea that we don't strictly adhere to population equality where we get down to one person. Oftentimes you could end up then with 3 people who are on the other side of a mountain range being connected to an area where they don't really belong or not part of, just for purposes of population equality, whereas most people on the balance would say it'd be far better to just keep those 3 people with their community as opposed to cutting it in half just to get down to 0% population deviation. So the Federal Voting Rights Act is really not a huge issue for you all. It largely has to do with historically underrepresented minority populations, and you simply don't have those within the boundaries of your district to the extent that they would trigger a Federal Voting Rights Act claim. And I'm going to cover some of the demographics of that later on in this presentation, but this will not be a huge concern for us going forward. But largely, this is federal law. And it largely comes from the 60s when mostly Southern states discriminated against African Americans through their election process. And so federal law stepped in to require that they go through a process that's fair and equitable to allow historically underrepresented minorities to represent or elect a candidate of their own. So just really quickly on communities of interest, I mentioned it earlier. Communities of interest is important because this is where most public testimony is going to be involved. You don't have huge pockets of historically underrepresented populations, but what you do have is you have lots of people who have different views on what part of the area they should be connected with. Should they be with Sonora? Should they be with some other area? They will come and argue that they want to be kept together largely. But in order, we have population equality, Voting Rights Act issues, and then communities of interest. So if people say, well, I really want to be in this same neighborhood as those people over there, that's great, right up until you get to the population deviation where you would max it out. And you say, well, we've got to draw a line here somewhere, so let's figure it out. So, but it can be anything. We've heard people argue about whether they're part of an area near an airport or dog parks, places of worship, can be anything. And all of those people are right, and you as a board will need to weigh which community of interest you find more compelling or how they should be connected in terms of how these districts are drawn. Compactness, just overall, is that you're looking for an area where you don't try to bypass one large population to get around it to get to another one. And a lot of people want squares and rectangles, but it's not ever going to be exact because your district certainly isn't shaped in a nice, perfect rectangle. It's just not the way it works. And so we will attempt to draw districts in such a way that are compact, where you have people that are close to each other in terms of communities. So contiguity is really the kind of last principle of redistricting for us to cover. I mentioned earlier about point contiguity, where these 2 districts, hypothetical districts, if they were connected, you wouldn't just connect them here on this point. Because these people tend to likely interact with these people who are on the same side of the mountain as them, as opposed to, and these people as well. And so this would be what we would call functionally contiguous, where this group of people would be with this group of people because they would far more likely interact with people on the same side of the mountain as opposed to the opposing side of the mountain. And so you're looking for functional contiguity. That can be that you can drive through the district, that you can walk through the district, and that you don't have to go wander around through the woods to try to get to another location. There should be an easy way to be able to get there and have those people be connected. Largely covered this. So one of the things about redistricting that's new now is I've been doing this since 2000. I worked in the state legislature, and I had this cool computer where I had all this data, and it was very unique that I was one of a few people that was able to do this. That's not the case anymore. There's people with these tools for District R and Representable and an app called Dave's Redistricting app. People can draw districts on their phone. And so we see a lot more people getting engaged in a very smart way. They know the data, they understand it. These free tools allow them to participate. And as we're going through this process, if we have people who want to attempt to draw districts, my team, Fabian, Eddie, and I are happy to help them participate in this process if that's what the board would like. but they do have a lot of these tools out there, and people are far more sophisticated on redistricting matters now than they were 20 years ago. I think that's pretty much it. Just in terms of demographics on here, this is when I talked about some of the Voting Rights Act. This is your boundary that we have. We have the total population of 48,000. The one thing I would offer about, and the reason that we have the asterisks here for the next to the census count, is that state law requires now that we do prisoner adjusted population to do redistricting. And so anyone who was incarcerated in a state facility was allocated back to the place that they came from. If they were in a state correctional facility, they were zeroed out. So those don't count in terms of redistricting. And so that's why that star is there. So if somebody would look at your district boundaries and say, oh, well, let me just tell you, your numbers are off by 100 people or so, most likely it's because of the prisoner adjusted population, which is what we're using for population equality. And so anyway, we share these numbers with you. Oh, sorry. But once again, you have an overwhelmingly white district. You don't have any of these populations that are such that you could, that any of either the Latino population, the Native American, Asian or African American population would be able to have control of a district with more than 50% citizens voting age population, which is what we used for the Voting Rights Act analysis. And so largely your analysis really comes down to population equality, communities of interest, contiguity, and compactness. Those are the issues largely we would be considering as we go forward. So I guess we have to have 5 hearings, and we have next steps in terms of what they are, in terms of figuring out how much public involvement we're going to have, how we do these. We've done a lot of them in person, but we're going to do some of these processes for us entirely online. It differs by the jurisdiction, but overall, our objective is to try to give you lots of options and have the board be able to adopt a map that they support. So I guess, Madam Chairwoman, that's what I've got. And so I don't know if there's any questions. I'm ready for whatever.
We do have Director Kearns with his hand up for a comment.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to ask a question that I can make an argument or that I could answer based on some of the data you just gave us and mainly that map you showed. But I'm getting asked this question a lot out on the street with people I know and whatnot. So that's why I'm going to ask it, and I'd like to hear your response. But the question I hear all the time is, why can't we just use supervisorial districts?
Well, let me ask you this. Are the boundaries of your district the same as the county? Is it exactly the same?
No, they are not, and that's been my answer. But what else could you add to that too, please?
Well, my guess is, and I haven't done the analysis, we could certainly do that for you and match them up by supervisorial districts. But my immediate reaction is you're not going to meet the population equality numbers. They're going to be, you're going to end up with some chunks that aren't part of your district. And so all of that then would be, that one district would be much smaller. And so you're talking about dividing a different size pie up 5 ways and trying to think that it's all the same. And you're dealing with a different size pie to divide up 5 ways. Wait, oh, there you are. You moved around on the Hollywood Squares thing. I lost you for a second, sir.
Yeah. No, I think that's the answer I was looking for, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Matt.
Would it be helpful for you to have us tell you those populations?
You mean the populations that are just in TUD's footprint, or?
Well, I believe, Fabian and Eddie, please correct me, but I believe we have the Tuolumne County Supervisor shapefiles. And so we could tell Director Kearns what the population is in each of the supervisorial districts, and we can certainly demonstrate the population inequality.
Yeah, we can run those numbers for you and get that back to you. Absolutely.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know because I haven't done it, but my guess is you're going to see huge population inequality problems.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said before, I agree with you, and I agree with your answer. I was just kind of answering that the benefit of the people who's been asking me that question for some time now. And I wanted you guys, the experts, to answer it. So you did. Thank you.
We'll send those to your staff and then they can distribute them out to you, but it's just, that's a very objective analysis, right? It's just going to be the numbers are the numbers and you can see what they are. But I know your County Board of Supervisors has adopted new lines, and we'll just simply apply your population to those lines.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have Director Boatright up with his hand up for a comment.
Good morning. Sorry, I came into this a little bit late. Maybe it was gone over already. Do we have a preliminary map of exactly the TUD service district area?
No, sir. We don't, because we're not allowed to, state law doesn't allow us to do draft maps until after we've had 2 other meetings. And so traditionally it's entirely up to the board, but usually what happens is after that, if people have different thoughts that they'd like to give us, that's great. We can record those all today. But usually after the second meeting, the board sends my team off and says, come back to us with 3 options, 5 options, whatever it might be. We would bring those back in meeting number 3. I'll just tell you that when that happens, you'll hate some of our maps as options and tell us they're crazy or they're awful or whatever. And that's okay. But we try to give you a lot of different options to choose from. And then oftentimes the board then, through that process on the 3rd meeting or 4th meeting, they either find one they like or find one they want to adjust to be able to be a good starting point for us to work together to be able to come up with a map that meets all the legal requirements and the will of the board.
Okay. Second question, how is it done to prevent, through voter registration, which is different than the population mapping that you spoke of? How is it ensured that there's no outside voter registration voting for the special district board?
Well, so there's a couple things that my team doesn't know. We're not loading. We have all of the political data for the state, but we bifurcate that and keep that completely separate out of anything that we do for you all. So, but in terms of making sure that people who aren't put in your boundaries, who are registered outside, we have the boundaries of the outside of your district. We're going to take that pie and put it into 5 pieces. And then eventually we're just going to transmit the lines to the county elections office. They then will allocate their voter registration files into those buckets that you all approve for them to do that. And so that would be whatever map we give them, as long as we don't try to annex parts of Nevada or Calaveras County or something like that, should be in such a way that the county elections office should easily be able to keep those voters and only the voters within those 5 buckets in the right place. Does that answer your question? I feel like I'm off.
Yeah, I think it did. Maybe it was a little bit long and kind of walked over itself, but I believe it did. Last question would be, will this be an ongoing cost to TUD as a special district to maintain those voter registration boundaries?
No, sir, only that 10 years from now, depending on your growth patterns and area, you probably have to do this after the census in 2031. And so, or 2030, excuse me. And so, and traditionally they do. And the usual reason is because you have population changes and you're trying to rebalance it after whatever changes have happened in the demographics of your area. And so in terms of ongoing cost, you likely would want to revisit this in 10 years. I will tell you that last night when I was in Visalia with this healthcare district, they hadn't redistricted in 30 years. Last time they did it was 1990. And so they have, and if you're familiar with Tulare County, that area has changed dramatically in 30 years. So they have some population deviations that are off the charts. And so they acknowledge that they had an issue. And so we're trying to fix that. But your area is a little bit different. And some of the areas that we've worked in, like the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors, the boundaries or the districts grew almost in equal amounts. They didn't actually have to draw new lines. They could have just used the same lines because magically it all kind of grew at about the same rate. And I can't tell you what's going to happen in 2030 in Tuolumne County. So I wouldn't speculate that.
All right. Thank you very much.
I want to just add something to what Matt was saying in the last question about making sure you don't have people put into your district, voters put into your district that don't belong in the district. So when we're drawing these maps, and the initial maps you're going to see when we get to it, and our analysis on these maps, we are using a thing called census geography. And census geography is where we have all of the data down to the census block. And those census blocks each have a number, like 6 people or 500 people or what have you. That is the only place, that is the lowest level of geography we have information on how many people actually live there. So that is basically the geography we have to use when drawing. Unfortunately, most special districts lines do not match perfectly with census block geography. So inevitably, what ends up happening is you will have these very straight lines for like a utility district, but it will cut across a census block. In those cases where there is a census block that say has 50 people in it and the utility district line cuts it, we include the entire census block for purposes of redistricting, even though 25 might live on one side and 25 might live on the other. The reason is we don't know where those 25 people live. We don't know where the number splits for 50. We just know that there are 50 people in that block. So there will be cases when we're doing these maps where you'll say, well, look, the line goes out there and we don't have that area. Suffice it to say, it's just for the purposes of redistricting. And so we can draw equal population into these districts. At the end, when we are bringing it back to the registrar and we are coming into the actual districts that are being voted on, those people who are in the census block but not in the utility district will not be sent a ballot. That'll be on the registrar's actual machines. When they say, okay, these are the people who live in the district, they will make sure that it's done correctly and we'll make sure the lines are correct. But we have to have those entire blocks for the purposes of redrawing. So it might look a little confusing when we start this process, and I just wanted to kind of make sure everyone was aware of that.
All right, thank you.
We have Director Murphy with her hand up for comment, and then Steve, and then Director Balin.
I just want to clarify a couple of things that I think you said, and I just want to make sure that I heard them right. So in looking at our data, right, you've, one of your slides showed that we are a primarily white county. And I think you also said that the number one reason that folks get forced to do redistricting, the lawsuits, are about racial inequity. That's my first question. Is that accurate?
It's racially polarized voting, and so racially polarized voting can exist even if the numbers of an ethnicity are really, really small. And the legislature has set a standard that's really small. So if you had an area that had where you have a larger Latino population or larger African American population, and statistically somebody could prove that either white voters vote against somebody or African American voters vote for somebody, or whatever the mix would be, if they can prove any sort of racially polarized voting for or against a candidate with race being the deciding factor, that's the legal standard to force special districts, school districts, cities to district elections.
Right. And so when you looked at the census data of our county, I thought I heard you say that didn't seem like much of an issue for our county.
So that is the analysis that I just went through is analysis under the California Voting Rights Act for the and so what I just talked about in my previous answer, when I was talking about the makeup, the ethnicity and racial makeup of your county and even your district, that's in discussion of the Federal Voting Rights Act, which the question would be, because your populations of Asians, Native Americans, African Americans, and Latino residents is so small, just based on those numbers, I can tell you none of those populations even come close to 20% on CVAT. So we couldn't draw, or even 10% actually. I'm pretty sure all of them are kind of equally spread out throughout the county. And so we would not be able to draw a district where one of those minorities would be able to be a 50% citizens voting age population of any district. I think that's a district drawing impossibility.
Yeah, and one of the factors in that here, we do have a considerable population of Native Americans in the area, but it's 2 tribes and they're in geographically separate areas that I don't think would be possible to connect together in a lawful way.
So if I can follow up on that, so one of the tests for that is a Supreme Court case called the Jingles preconditions. And the idea is, can a compact, cohesive area contain people who fit that description? And I don't think that you have that within the confines of your district.
No, and we have stuff in between the 2 areas that would throw the numbers off.
That's right.
So a concern that I have is that we do have, and we're in an era of time where there's a lot of special interests and a lot of special interests in our county. We are a utility district that is one thing that spreads throughout our whole county. You know, the headwaters are up highway, up Sonora Pass, and we deliver water all the way down, to the 1,000-foot elevation, I think. So we have this huge swath, and it seems to me by districting, we are actually, I feel, going to less represent people fairly than if we left it as a unified whole. And I also am concerned you don't actually want special interests weighing in on pieces of the water district, because you really the water district needs to be focused on as a whole, because it is one entity that doesn't work without all of the pieces, right? You can't be like Twain Hart's gonna, get what they want, which, and not the Jamestown or something like that. So I have a high concern that we are going to get into a situation where we diminish equity rather than increase equity. Talk to me about that.
Well, I can't argue with you that the reality is that some of those things are governance issues in terms of how you and your board decide to work together to serve different areas. But overall, one of the issues, I served on the board of supervisors in Yolo County here for 12 years, and there certainly is a sense of ownership, or I don't know what the proper term would be, where people tend to only focus on their individual district as opposed to the whole area. But it really depends on the type of leader that are elected to those areas. Some people have a more comprehensive view. Some people have a very narrow view. Some people, and I'm sure you've seen locally in elections, there are people who run for office who really only care about, one thing as opposed to the comprehensive view. And that's not right or wrong. The electorate gets to choose, and then there's governance issues within the board. But district elections has some pros and cons. I probably should then, I talked to you about some of the reasons that people advocate for district elections in my presentation. I should probably have a slide where people say why they don't like district elections to balance that out. But all of your points, I can't disagree with. They're valid concerns, but some of them are about redistricting, and then some are about governance. And I'm focused really only on redistricting. Governance is an issue that will continue on long after this process ends in terms of drawing lines.
But the drawing lines will affect the governance because rather than being elected by the general user populace, you will be special interests will be more will have a more powerful position. Conceivable.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, next we'll have Director Balin and then Director Boatwright.
Thank you. I've been on this board, this is my 4th term, and I have gone through 4 election cycles, and I'm looking forward to strengthening and interacting with the community. You answered my question about the prison, and as I understand it, Matt, you excluded that population from the districting process. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, it should, all of our data should have reflected, you have outgoing and ingoing, and some areas have only one or the other. Actually, some could just have one if they don't have a state correctional facility within their boundaries. But the state correctional facility you have should have been zeroed out. Everyone else should have returned based on the data they're given. And the only qualifier I'll make to that is probably telling you all more than you ever wanted to know about this. But if I was arrested and I lived at 123 First Street in Sonora, they would put me at 123 First Street in Sonora. If all they had in the state corrections department was I lived in Sonora, they would randomly place me in one of the census blocks in Sonora. If all they had was Tuolumne County, they would randomly place me in a census block in Tuolumne County, and that's done by the statewide database, entirely at random. And so, but there are people in our correctional systems who they just would have Matt Rexroad with no description on where I was from. They just know where I was arrested and whatever else. And so there are a bunch of people who don't get sent back anywhere because there's no address to send them back to. And so it's all kind of a data train wreck, but I'm very confident that the data we're giving you is from the statewide database. It is the accepted data in California. But the intent of the legislature was to redistribute everyone back to where they came from. I don't think they're actually getting everyone. They're getting most everyone, but not everyone. But the facility will be zeroed out, and everyone who would be applicable to your boundaries or attributable to them would be placed in those boundaries based on the data that we gave you.
Thank you. My next question is regarding, we have geographical diversity regardless of where one of our federally recognized tribes live. TUD has data on the water use in this county geographically. In other words, we know that people use their water a lot differently up in Twain Harte than down in Jamestown, for an example. So a lot of our agricultural community who is very interested in this process lives in the west end of our community, and we also have another a tribe there who's interested in economic diversity down there. So just our water use diversity based on geography is very important to these constituents, and having a level of representation is important. I have a question because I've been also asked about the divisions following the supervisorial divisions. We are different because Groveland has a voice on our, has a supervisorial district that also takes in, because it's census driven, parts of the other side of the river. So like your little diagram that has the mountains, well, they kind of, if you think of that as a watershed, they're on both sides. That's District 4, I believe. So they pay property taxes to Tuolumne County. A portion of the property tax, about $1 million, goes to TUD. Now, I do not know for certain if the Groveland people vote for TUD directors, and if anybody can answer that, that would be great. Okay, I'm seeing a director shaking their head. Okay, so even though we get taxes from them, they are not, I know they're not considered part of our jurisdictional boundary, TUD, but they do support TUD. So what you're saying, I mean, it would be easy, it just would be easy just to make everything match our supervisorial divisions. However, when we do look at maps that you guys draw up, we can ask that they follow some of those lines, I would imagine.
Yes, so actually a couple points that you made. One is in terms of looking at the maps of the supervisorial district lines, as we're going through this process, we have all of the Tuolumne County supervisorial lines in our system. And so it is, and my job is not to convince you or advocate for any kind of map. But at one point in this process, as we're going through, I might suggest to you, if all things being equal, hey, if we just move this line a little bit, it would match up with the supervisorial district lines and make it a whole lot easier for your county elections office not to have to do a whole bunch of different ballots across the way. That's just being a good government neighbor. And so if you all want to reject that, that's fine. But that might be a case where we would just say, hey, we just want to raise our hands. We could make this, we could assist the county elections office in not having to do different ballots, and we could save them some time and some hassle. We will do that as we go forward. You're free to reject those, but we would call your attention to those. And then the other part of the question, I know that Director Murphy answered it, but the boundaries that we're using don't have to do with any outer district contracts that you have. So if you have an out of district service agreement with somebody or whatever, they're not actually part of your boundary. And so that wouldn't be included in any of that.
Is there any comment from any other board member?
Director, did that answer your question?
Yes, we do have.
So.
Sorry, we have Director Boatwright with a comment, and then Director Murphy.
Had a tough time getting my mute button off. Thank you. This is all, very good discussion going on here. If we go forward with this, let me start with a different question. Has any other special district or municipality or school board approaching the subject of districting actually asked their constituents before moving forward with splitting up into districts versus at-large elections?
So you were a little garbled, sir, but I think your question was, am I aware of any districts, school districts, or anything else that are taking either a vote of the people or asking their constituents about their maps as they go forward? Was that the question?
Correct. Well, asking them if they should go through with districting versus staying at large voting.
I have to tell you that I'm not aware of any. The reality is that we don't see an awful lot of people really involved in redistricting. Fabian and Eddie and I work on it every day, and it's very exciting to us, but we're probably the only 3 people on this call that woke up today thinking about redistricting. I would love that everyone was more involved in it, but we've gone through whole processes where we were dealing with incredibly complicated Voting Rights Act issues. There hasn't been a single newspaper article written about it. Not a single member of the public came to testify, nothing. And so if you ask most people about their district boundaries, and Director Kearns had a question about the supervisorial districts where I live, and I was a county supervisor for 12 years. I'm pretty sure that almost 0% of my constituents could have told you exactly which supervisorial district they lived in. They might be able to tell you who their supervisor is, but they couldn't say 3 or 2 or 1. It's only a very select politically involved people who are super involved in that. But I don't know of any districts that are doing any sort of public request for permission or approval or support of the idea of going to district elections, sir.
All right, thank you. Next question would be, if a candidate is registered in one of the 5 districts that'll come up for the TUD is unopposed, that person automatically takes a seat?
Yes, well, that's not a redistricting or districting issue. That's simply the way election law works, right? If you're the only one who files, you win.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. The part of running unopposed, what if nobody from a district applies for candidacy? As far as does a candidate
might have it
live in the district that they're in or running for?
In such a situation, if nobody runs for a position, the election code And then the government code provide that in such a situation, the county shall appoint any person that is qualified and that files nomination papers in such a situation, or even in such a, if the Board of Supervisors does not want to act, the TUD board could fill that position by appointment.
Okay. And then just one last question related to Director Balin's line of comments and questions. Do we know if the Groveland area's property tax is actually a portion of the contribution to TUD property tax allocation?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't.
That would be information well worth researching. As to, I don't believe it would be fair to have Groveland property tax contributed to something, to a service that they're not available to. Property tax, and that I'm aware of, like for a school district, you're in the district and tax that way. But I would think the special district would be the same way. But that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Can I comment on David's question there real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah, David, I was wondering the same thing. If the Groveland, for instance, if you live in Pine Mountain Lake up there in Groveland, does that portion of your property tax, does that go to TUD or does it go to Groveland Community Services District? I don't know if Steve has an answer for that or not, but that would, I think that's what you were driving at, weren't you, David?
Yes, that's correct.
I'll weigh in here real quick. I don't have a definitive answer, but my understanding is ever since Prop 13, the allocations were set at that time, and I do believe they're based on the actual district boundaries of TUD. So I do not think all the property taxes from Groveland would be part of that allocation. However, I'm already reaching out to the county to confirm that, and I'll come back to the board to clarify. But again, my understanding is that there is a separate allocation. TUD's property taxes they get are not from the total pool of the whole county, but rather there is an apportionment and allocation that's done within the system. And I think, Jesse, if that fits with what you know as well, but I will confirm that.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, the county would be the best person, the best source of that information. We don't know how they split up that pie.
All right, we have Director Murphy with a comment and then Director Kearns afterwards.
All right, so when we're looking at the dividing up the districts, I'm assuming that we're looking at 5 districts because there's 5 director spots. Concern that I have, 5 equal sized districts. We only had, I think, 11,000 people vote in the last election for the TUD directors, which then makes our districts very, very small, right? So if you have 5 districts, you have 2,000, maybe 3,000 people in a district voting for a candidate. It seems very, very small. It seems fairness can get affected in that, that a large, special interest group can easily kind of take over that voting block. So I'm just back to that. I think in our district, I see equity problems in the redistricting rather than districting, not redistricting, but I see equity problems in the districting versus holding it as a whole entity, because honestly, we had maybe 12,000 people vote in the TUD special district election last go round. Could you just speak to that a little bit on how this is actually providing more equity than the way that we're because that's the point of doing it. That's why redistricting is done, is to make sure that people are represented accurately and democracy works correctly. And I just see this as being more of a hindrance to that than a help.
Well, I don't know that I have a really good answer for that, except to tell you that, there are, if you want to measure it by registered voters, we have members of the state legislature who win their elections with 20,000 votes cast and others who lose with 100,000 votes cast. And so there are huge differences throughout the way, when you end up with district elections in terms of how that works. And so the only thing I've thought of that, you're mentioned about special interests, there are certainly, one of the counterpoints to that very well could be, my original slide about one of the reasons that people advocate for district elections is lower barriers to entry for candidates to win. And so there are folks that would argue that having large districts that are more expensive to campaign in, more people in them, it does allow heavily funded special interests to be a more dominant force in those larger elections than they are in smaller elections where people can win by walking door to door. I don't actually even really want to argue this point with you. I'm trying to come up with alternatives back and forth, but I understand your point. None of them are invalid. They're just all things to consider as you think about district elections versus at large elections.
Yeah, and what I found, because I ran for the first time this last go round. And I found that a lot of those costs that I ran a very shoestring, entry level, low budget campaign, and it's my costs wouldn't have been much different if my area had been smaller, because of the fees that you have to pay along the way. There's almost $1,100 of just fees to pay.
So the only other thing I would ask you to consider in your analysis of this, and I don't think anything you've said is wrong. It's just a different view, right? Or
Yep.
Different view. The only thing that I would encourage you to consider is the burden is so small under the California Voting Rights Act to force you to go to district elections at an incredible cost to the district, that if you were to say, no, we want to stay at large, the burden is so small that not only would it trigger anyone basically who's falls into one of those ethnic minorities to find an attorney or an attorney to find them to send a letter, you're going to pay, at least $30,000 in attorney's fees alone they're capped. But then if you insisted on not doing it, please just Google Modesto, Palmdale, Santa Clarita, or Santa Monica. All of them spent millions trying to fight the idea that they didn't have racially polarized voting. And to my knowledge, every single one of them is lost. And so in terms of even if all of your points are true, there is a potential legal liability with the idea of trying to stay with at-large elections.
Is there any precedent of people suing over the mapping out of it, creating more inequity than there was to begin with? Because it seems like that's what we might end up with. We might end up separating the tribes into different districts, but basically watering down the tribal vote by dividing the two tribes into separate voting areas with separate representation.
Most of redistricting litigation almost never has to do with population equality numbers because it's a very objective measure. You take the population, you divide it in 5. That's the number I told you about, the 10% variation or variance on those. It really has to do with Voting Rights Act issues, which are the number one issue where you have redistricting litigation. But those issues regarding the Federal Voting Rights Act really don't apply to your area, and I can't imagine what that process would be. So your real potential legal liability, if you decide to go to district elections, would have to be something based on some sort of process defect in terms of the way you go forward in terms of that. That would be the only thing that I could think of that would be a problem for you legally. I'm unaware of anyone suing because they think the redistricting process created inequity in a community. And largely the legislature has said that they prefer district elections. That's why they made the barriers so low to entry in terms of forcing special districts and cities to do this.
And from what I understand also, special districts in water, it doesn't seem like it's been a huge push for people to do the redistricting in that. It seems more that it's been on the city, county, the more, on the level of like the supervisors and things like that. Is that accurate?
Well, every county has district elections and always has for decades now. And so the counties are taken care of, but we're working with at least 4 water districts, and I think probably 6 total special districts right now going through this process. And so they're either redistricting or moving towards district elections. So I think it's going to be more and more common and will continue to grow.
Very good. Thank you so much.
All right, we have Director Kearns and then Director Balin.
Okay, Director Murphy, I sympathize with your comments. I have similar feelings about this. However, Matt nailed it. I think is that it is so low. The threshold is so low for some predatory attorney or lawyer to come in here and force us to do this and cost us an extremely high amount of money to do this later on, rather than us taking the bull by the horns now. But I agree with your comments, Lisa, that I'm not sure for Tuolumne County that we're going to really gain much, but it could keep us out of trouble down the line. Anyway, that wasn't my question. I just wanted to express those feelings. Matt, the question I do have is, when we get these districts, we settle on them, and or these divisions, and is there going to be, or is there any part of the law that stipulates that that a candidate has to be a resident of those divisions to run for a particular district or division?
Mr. Barton, you might be better to answer that question. But I believe your probably county ordinance requires you to be a resident of the district. I'm unaware of a case where you don't have to be a resident of your district, except for very unique special districts that really only require land ownership. But I believe, just like with being a member of the Board of Supervisors or a city council, you need to be a member of your district. But I'll leave that to Mr. Barton.
Yeah, I just pulled out the water code. I don't have the whole water code committed to memory just yet, but I'm getting on it. I'm getting toward that. So I can have
all of you over in 15 minutes. You should have it done by then.
Yeah.
The only reason I asked that because isn't it Congress, I believe, that you don't have to physically live in the district and still run for it?
The United States Constitution only requires that members of Congress be a resident of the state they represent. They do not have to live in their districts.
Okay. Yeah, I would be, I would certainly, if it isn't a requirement, I would certainly like to see that put in here if we have the power to do so. I don't think that would be prudent for us to approve something like that. Just my own opinion. Go ahead, Lisa.
At an earlier meeting,
Raise your hand, please.
I
Please raise your
believe
hand.
Jesse had mentioned at an earlier meeting, Jesse had stated that it's up to how we put things forward, that we can choose with the water code, and he'll have that up in just a second. But at an earlier meeting, he had said that we will be making that choice of whether the person has to be in the district or not.
Yes. I realize I'm out of order here. I can wait, President Balin.
No, you are in order.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so the water code, it's water code 30730. And that provides that the board may, if it deems to be in the best interest of the district, by resolution, submit to the voters at any district election the question whether the directors shall be elected by divisions or from divisions. By division means election of the director by voters in the division alone. The term from division, as used in this article, means election of directors who are residents of the division from which they are elected by the voters of the entire district. So if it is by division, they do not have to be residents. And if it is from division, they do have to be residents. And Matt, I think it's by, isn't it?
I think so.
Well, then, if it isn't, if we don't make this from, then what are we actually gaining? Because even if we make these divisions, but anybody can run from them, or anybody in the county, no matter where they live, can run for any particular division, then what have we really gained? Anybody want to comment?
I don't think that the elections code necessarily precludes what you're asking, Director Kearns. I just don't. If the desire is to have the directors from the district or from within the division, if that's the objective here, then I haven't done any research to see if you could insist on that, but it's certainly authorized by the water code.
Yeah,
I think we should do more research into this to answer that direct question.
Okay.
I just make that comment because if you don't have to be a resident of a particular division, then you could still theoretically get 5 directors in a very close proximity, like Matt, you mentioned early on when you first started here, representing all 5 districts and or all 5 divisions, and 4 of them not living in any of their own divisions, correct? Or am I missing the point there?
I think that's a question for your board in terms of what you want the standard to be.
Okay. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, we have Director Balin, and then Jesse, and then Director Boatwright.
Thank you. I think steps moving forward, we need a couple of points to clarify here with you, Matt. One is to actually, beyond a shadow of a doubt, clarify that Groveland is outside of our area, and really make sure that that is correct so that that will not be part of the mapping process. And the other one is, I'm very much in favor, I'll just tell you that right now, of us being from the area. For an example, I was talking to some of the ranching community in the west end of the county, and they understood, and that's what they would be supportive of as well, is that kind of representation for those interests out there. And so that's where I think we should go as one board member here, is that we make a decision as we go forward that we want to be from. Otherwise, as Jeff said, it's you know, it's not, well, it's just not going to be, in my opinion, you have an interest within your geographic and socioeconomic area, and so it just makes sense to be from that area and have constituents want to talk to you about those issues. And then my last comment is, I think we need to be very careful when we talk about our 2 federally recognized tribes. They are 2 separate tribes. They have 2 separate issues. They have 2 separate governance bylaws, councils, everything. And so I think we would need to be careful to lump them in as one. And that's all my comments.
And I just wanted to address some of the comments made by Director Kearns and Director Murphy. You know, with regard to whether or not splitting the district up by division or districts, depending on how you want, which term you want to use, I think the concern here is there is a difference between what is the legal liability the district faces by not splitting the district up with breaking it up. And Director Murphy was concerned about the equity of breaking it up and whether that would lead to a lawsuit. And equity is not a term that the district has to meet. Just to be completely objective and frank about it, the equity is not a term that the election has to meet in order to be legally compliant. However, it cannot be. Racially polarized voting cannot exist. That is legally prohibited. And so we have to make sure that we separate those two. Clearly, the objective will be to obtain some level of equity, but that cannot by itself defeat a lawsuit challenging the district's method of voting as racially polarized. So I don't know if that helps or if that will just lead. Oh, it does. Okay, I see Director Murphy nodding. Sometimes I'm reluctant to share such, legal summaries in that way that are just, equity is just, there's no legal standard for it. So, and if that helps, great. If it doesn't, then ask another question and I'll see if I can answer that. Thank you.
All right, Director Boatwright. You're currently muted.
I think this is kind of an interesting conversation that the board is having. Certainly, equity plays into population, but my question would be on population for the districting mapping. Is there a known component of registered voters within that population as a mapping is done?
No, we don't use, unless you all were to order us to, we would not be counting registered voters or looking at any political data or your past election data or performances by national or statewide candidates in any of this information at all. It would entirely be based on census data.
Okay. Would that data for population versus registered voters, once a mapping is done, then be available or researchable?
Well, yes, actually, the county elections office, once we gave them the 5 different bins for your districts, they would be able to tell you exactly which registered voters live there, all the different information about those individual districts that were drawn.
Okay. And then versus whether you have to be from or just represent a different district, would a board member such as a congressional candidate be able to change district representation at a later date, i.e. represent District 1 1 year and then run for representation for District 5 the following election cycle?
I don't know the answer to that. That would be an elections code issue in terms of how they would end up doing that. But hypothetically, we've had people move around all over the state representing different parts of the state. So I guess that probably would be possible, but it wouldn't impact how we would draw these district lines.
All right, thank you.
We have Director Balin with a comment. You're currently muted, Director Balin.
Okay, thank you. Matt, I appreciate your time for being here and answering our questions. Before I open it up to staff and public, I would like to ask you what our next steps are, including making a decision to be either by or from division. And please go ahead and tell us what our next steps are.
Well, the next step, the the next step that we have to do is we have to basically do a replay of the meeting we're having right now with a similar presentation about the 101 and redistricting for the public to consider, for you all to consider. You may formulate different questions or thoughts. I don't know if you want to do that today. We're happy. We haven't gotten a lot of direction from board members yet in terms of different communities of interest they'd like to see represented in the maps. We can do that next time if you all want to think about what we talked about today, or we can do it now. It's up to the board. We're happy to support whatever. We do need to do a replay basically of this meeting, maybe not with all the same questions, but a similar presentation. I'll probably try to do it much more quickly to allow the public to be involved. And then my anticipation is, unless the board has other views, that you would send my team off to come up with several different options for you to consider. And that on our third meeting, Fabian, Eddie, or I would run through the different maps with you and show the different geographies. What we would send to you that's worked pretty well in the past is, PDFs are great, but it's really hard to really drill down into exactly where things are on a simple 8.5 by 11 PDF. So we've been really successful using Google Maps to show, to allow people to drill in then on individual areas so they can see where their favorite restaurant is or whatever they want to look at in terms of zeroing it down. And that allows people to get their questions answered with some things that we may not know that might be important to them that they hadn't referenced. And then those maps would need to be public on public display for 7 days before that third meeting. And so they would be available to you all. I'll just tell you right now, whatever number of maps we end up giving to you, there will be some that you hate and maybe a couple that you like, and we'll work through that and we'll amend the maps. And maybe we find one that's a good starting point to adjust. We'll walk through that process. And then we have to have a fourth and a fifth meeting as we try to come to consensus on which map best represents the interest of the board.
Thank you. And of those maps, I would be very interested in mimicking supervisorial lines, at least one of the maps having that kind of layout.
When we do, and we will have this for you before our next meeting, I believe it was Director Kearns asked about the supervisorial lines early on in our conversation. We'll get that back to you relatively soon, so you'll have those. But once again, and when I answered his questions, I believe that the supervisorial lines would provide us with population equality problems, but we'll confirm that and we'll let you know.
Thank you. And again, thank you for your presentation. So we have other items on the agenda. So and plus we have a closed session after this, and I have a hard stop at lunch. So perhaps we could have a second meeting then, rather than continue now. Were those the two choices you gave us, Matt?
Yes, so we could take your comments regarding particular areas you wanted in district together. We could do that now. We could do that after the second meeting, after you thought about it. They're both equally valid, and my team's happy to help whatever, but we're not going to try to really refine maps or get them very detailed until after our next meeting.
Thank you. Our board, is there any comment on that? Okay. Staff, would you like to comment before I turn it over to the public?
Yeah, real quick, Matt, I appreciate you being here. It's been a great discussion, lots of good questions. We've got some homework to do, and I'm looking forward to the next time we meet. So thank you, Matt, appreciate it.
I wish I knew the answer to some of those questions.
We answered a lot of them, but well done, thank you.
Yes. Corey, members of the public, please.
Yes, we do have Rick with his hand up for a comment.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm Rick Breeze-Martin, and I appreciate this presentation. I support moving towards districts, and I look like you've got a lot of work ahead of you. So I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. It was very educational, and good luck with the board in struggling with the nuances of making this all work. I appreciate that. I have to go, so I will step on one other item and take a moment to say congratulations to Terry Cox for her retirement. I have enjoyed all the work you've done over the years, and I hope that the County Board of Supervisors, City and TUD take to heart what you've been telling them on your way out, your farewell way out message. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Corey, any other public comment?
Not that I see at the moment, no.
Okay. Well, since this is informational, then we will wait until or sleep on this and think about mapping and the socioeconomic aspects of this, et cetera, and geographical aspects. And are we free to, I don't know, Jesse, would we want to give comments, wait until our next meeting and then come forward with our comments then?
I think that would be appropriate. I think the purpose here today, and Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but was to just give a general summary of the work that they've completed so far, keep the board up to date, give the board some things to think about. And clearly he succeeded there. There's numerous items the board had questions about and want to think further about before making any hard decisions. And then Matt will come prepared at the next district meeting to provide a little bit more detail, and the board will come prepared with more questions to make sure they fully understand this process. Is that a fair summary, Matt?
Yeah, only that the one other thing that was important is that we took public comment on the process, right? The public had the opportunity to be able to comment. We checked that box. That's one of the meetings we had, and now we're 20% through the meetings that are required.
And then it would be up to the board to then vote on whether we wanted to be from division, or what was the other one, by division?
Well, this is a new question for me. I got to tell you, this is one that I would need to look into, and I think Jesse's probably better to answer that question than me. But this is a new one for me, so I don't have a good answer for you.
I'll speak to Matt offline, and then I may also speak to an attorney who practices more on the election code than I do, and see if I can get a clear answer for the board, or I will get a clear answer for the board.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, again, thanks, Matt, and thank you, Fabian. We appreciate this, and we will see you at the next meeting. Thanks again.
Have a great meeting.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Melissa, will you please read the next item on regular business?
Okay, item number 4, consider adopting a resolution recognizing Mrs. Terry Cox for her contributions to the district as Tuolumne County's Community Development Block Grant Coordinator.
Good morning, board, members of the public. This is Erik Johnson. Mr. Breeze Martin had a nice prelude to this item. It isn't every day that the board gets to consider recognizing someone who isn't a TUD staff person, who's a member of the community. And last week, the County Board of Supervisors recognized Terry, and that's what we're here to do today. We wanted to bring this resolution to you, not only for her contributions to the county as a whole, but really to TUD specifically. I'm not sure how many of you have interacted with Terry over the years and if you know her personally, but she doesn't really like the spotlight. She's kind of that silent partner, always working in the background. But without her assistance, we would not have been able to obtain over $5 million in grants and do some really fantastic projects for our districts over the last 12 years or so. Some of those include Jamestown Tank, which we got Tank of the Year award in 2019. Some of those include the Gibbs Sewer Rehabilitation, Big Hill Raw Water Storage Pond up there near the treatment plant. Most recently, the Shaw's Flat Tank, or the Gopher Replacement Tank, as some of us know of that. And anyway, so if you don't know, the CDBG program is extremely complex. I mean, there's reams and reams of information about this and regulations that Terry has learned how to navigate over the years. And we've always felt just a great level of trust and confidence and respect in her abilities. TUD is not eligible to receive CDBG funding on its own. It has to come through the county to us. So when the county sends out a request or a call for projects as it is, Terry usually reaches out to the various agencies, and we're afforded an opportunity to propose a project. And so we've collaborated very well on that front for many years. Her career is much longer, though, than my experience with Terry, 40 years in working in this field in the county, and not just Tuolumne County, but other counties up and down the foothills. She's written over 120 funding proposals successfully and obtained over $50 million for the foothill communities, 32 million for our county, which she is a resident of. But the money doesn't exactly tell the full story for Terry. Because she's a resident, she has a deep felt passion and a heart for disadvantaged people. And some of the programs that she has been able to fund over the years include Meals on Wheels, housing stabilization, small business, the food bank, and others. Steve, Jennifer, and myself have had an opportunity to work with Terry over the years. Steve may have something to say, but we've always known Terry to be at the top of her game, even when retirement was basically right around the corner. And so we want to congratulate her. It's finally here. I have a resolution I can read after we receive comments.
I'll just chime in real quick. Terry, I very much appreciate your help and your contribution. Most people don't really understand what goes into these types of grants. CDBG is a federal funded grant, and as such, there are what I used to call single audit act requirements. So, you know, my introduction to Terry was her coming over to confirm that TUD was following it. She was the monitor and doing that sort of thing. So she's integral for us to get a clean audit. She's integral for us to continue to receive the funding. And I've worked with a lot of different grant administrators, a lot of different programs over my years as CPA. And Terry really did a first-class job. And she's going to be missed, and well-deserved retirement. And thank you, Terry, and enjoy yourself.
Open it up to board comment here before we read the resolution, but thank you for those comments, Steve. Yeah, Terry's just a real master of the craft, and grant writing truly is a master, is a craft and a skill that you don't just learn through a textbook. I think we all know that.
Jennifer.
Sorry, I can't find where to raise my hand on Zoom, so I'll just do it manually. Yeah, I've worked with Terry quite a bit over this last year, and let me tell you, I'm sad to see her go. Very excited for her. She's done a phenomenal job. She's very clear in what she asks for. There's very little confusion when it comes to getting these grants and the things that she needs, because she's just very clear in what she needs. She's been an absolute pleasure. We're going to miss her dearly, but I think I can speak for everyone, and we can all say that we're very excited and happy for her and her retirement. She deserves every bit of it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate Terry. I've met her a couple of times. I've never had the pleasure of working directly with her, but I don't have to tell anybody here that her reputation spreads wide and far around Tuolumne County. And we're going to miss you, Terry, and congratulations again. And we're very, very honored to have worked with you in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other board member like to comment? If not, I'll comment. I don't see any other hands.
Director Boatwright has his hand up for a comment.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Boatwright.
Yeah, Terry, thank you for your service. I definitely never had the opportunity to work with you directly, but with one of the projects, one of the major ones, the Gibbs Sewer Rehabilitation Project. There was a very large improvement to that system, and thank you for your long dedicated years of service. Enjoy your retirement.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Terry, I wish you all the best in your retirement. I can't thank you enough for setting the bar on grant writing and helping so much to leverage the ratepayer dollar and making it stretch and go a long way. We could not have done it without you. So thank you so much. I hope you trained. I hope you have successors that we can work with because you are a shining example of somebody who participates fully in our community. So I hope you do that again after you retire and you open up the next chapter of your life here. But in gratitude, thank you so much.
If it's okay, I'd like to say a couple things too, Terry. And I'm really sorry I never really got an opportunity to meet you in person and thank you in person because what I've learned now in the last week or so is you've played an integral part in many of our successes here at the district. And from those of us who spend a lot of our times in operations where we deal with things on a day-to-day basis, those contributions that you led on our behalf is invaluable. We really appreciate it. I just got to tell you, your parting words on your retirement day that I was able to read in the newspaper were very inspiring, and I can trust you that I will reference back to your final comments for years to come. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Corey, is any member of the public other than Rick wishing to comment?
Not that I see at the moment, no.
Thank you. And Erik, were you going to read the resolution before the board votes?
Yes, I was. I see Terry has risen her hand.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you all for your comments. So I think at least some of you heard my comments to the Board of Supervisors, or you've read about them. My concern in that, I'm not going to be in the middle of it anymore, is that there's not going to be like a point person for organizing the city, the county, the special districts, that there's not an obvious go-to person to take responsibility for looking ahead for the money and for making sure that all of the various partners know what's likely to be available and assisting them insofar as that's possible to get their preparation done. And Erik and I talk about this every once in a while because we're neighbors. And so, I don't know who can be tagged for this job, but it is important that there be somebody that is kind of the ringleader for this, because otherwise, everybody's too busy. And, just thinking about what TUD's needs are just in water, not even going to sewer. But, I was reading the article in the paper about the tank that had failed in Twain Harte, and they were listing all of your infrastructure. And it's like, boy, is that a lot of projects. So, as I look ahead to where this federal money will come down and some state money, which agencies are likely to get it, and then what level of readiness that they're going to expect for projects that are funded. They could have all the money on the planet and there wouldn't be enough to go around. So, the districts, the jurisdictions that have put the time and the money into that organization ahead of time have the opportunity to do projects that they would never get to do. So, you know, some of your infrastructure or PG&E's infrastructure, which, you know, may eventually belong to you, those kind of projects are so expensive. I mean, we have done some projects in CDBG that went as high as 5 million. More recently, it was 3.5, and this year it's back down to 1.5 million. So the ability to do these really expensive ones, like the main canal, or, you know, some of your treatment plants that are so expensive, you know, normally you would only get a shot at one of those, you know, every 10 years, every 15 years. And with the infrastructure money that looks like it will be coming, it's like, you know, I know you have a capital improvements list and you have budgeted according to the funds that you think will be available, but it's time to think a little bigger. And then somebody needs to sort out what your options are when you don't yet own your water rights. You know, because, for instance, when the rim fire, the national disaster recovery competition, the NDR projects that resulted in the new resiliency centers. So when the discussion was initiated to the county about, gee guys, what kind of projects do you want to do? I think the main canal came up then. And the county was told incorrectly that they could not apply for that project. You know, there is a federal regulation that says that you can, and, you know, we were given incorrect information. So knowing what the requirements might be for the particular funding source, and sort of what stage you need to be in terms of negotiating purchase from PG&E. This is a very important piece that needs to be nailed down as soon as possible, because it may give you access to funds on portions of your infrastructure that you may just be in the process of purchasing. So, you know, I don't know who can check this out, but it's a very important thing to do, because the most expensive stuff is the stuff that you would be likely to buy, not stuff that you already own. So talk to somebody at the county, insist that there be somebody that is working with you and the other public utility districts, so that this sort of organization is initiated now. I mean, the infrastructure money could come down in a year, and it's projects that are ready to go then. So, you know, getting your preliminary design, getting right of way, getting property acquisition, it's like it at least needs to be organized. You know, you have to have a decent cost estimate. You have to be able to do a project within the time limits that they set. So it's time to get to work, folks. And you know, I'm sure I will be talking to Erik about this further, but you know, don't wait for somebody else to initiate this, because as far as I can see, there's no obvious candidate. So you guys have the most to gain in terms of subsidizing your capital costs. And so, you know, tag somebody and get started. And if the ball drops on the other side of the net, just keep pushing. So,
thank you, Terry. Appreciate it. Yeah, we will heed your advice. We will not let the ball drop on our side of the fence, for sure. And,
okay, great.
You know, I got a good relationship with Tracy and others out at the county, and I tend to improve my relationships with the board of supervisors as well. So again, thank you very much for everything.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands, Erik, could you please read the resolution?
Certainly. And that's what I like about Terry. Very direct, very pragmatic, very goal-oriented, very focused. That's why she's good at what she does. Great advice. A resolution of the Board of Directors of the Tuolumne Utilities District recognizing Terry Cox for contributions to the district. Whereas after nearly 40 years of service to the community, and specifically the last 12 years of service to the Tuolumne Utilities District, Terry Cox will be retiring from the position of Community Development Block Grant Coordinator for Tuolumne County. And whereas Terry has been an integral component in the district's success in obtaining community development block grants to fund water and sewer infrastructure improvements for economically disadvantaged areas of our county. And whereas Terry has assisted the district in obtaining over $5 million in grants, which have funded new water treatment facilities, storage tanks, pump stations, and pipelines, in addition to significant rehabilitation of portions of the district's sewer collection system. And whereas without Terry's contributions and the associated grant funding, many of these projects would not have been possible. And whereas Terry's grant funding expertise has been a tremendous asset to the district, and she will be missed. Now, therefore, the Board of Directors of the Tuolumne Utilities District on this 25th day of January 2022 recognizes Terry Cox and expresses its sincere appreciation for her service to the district and its customers, and wishes her well in retirement and in her future endeavors.
Thank you, Erik. Any other comments from the board? Okay, seeing no hands. Corey, does Director Boatwright have a comment? I can't see him.
No, no comment that I see at the moment, no.
Thank you. Any member of the public wish to comment?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, thank you. All right, Melissa, will you please call for the, no, wait, excuse me. Is there a motion to adopt this resolution?
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
David Boatwright, or sorry, Director Boatwright has his hand up. I believe he's seconding.
I would second that motion.
Thank you, Director Boatwright. Is there any further discussion? Any member of the public?
Not at the moment, no.
Hearing none, then Melissa, will you please call for the vote?
Okay, Director Balin,
Aye.
Director Boatwright,
Aye.
Director Kearns,
Aye.
Director Murphy,
Aye.
Director Ringen.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Melissa. And I would encourage our general manager to get with Terry. She made it some excellent suggestions, and that list, I could just see it rolling over into our strategic planning. So no grass grows under anybody's feet. So, you know, this is not an agendized item right now, but boy, is her counsel very, very important to us. So thank you. Alrighty, Melissa, next item, please.
Okay, item number 5, operational update on the water and wastewater departments for December 2021.
Good morning, board members, staff, and members of the public. Erik Hall. I'll start on page 2 with some of the updates here. First is just a big thank you to PG&E for getting out and finding the problem and fixing it in a timely manner. They got us water back very quickly in the conditions that everybody was facing. All the departments worked a lot of hours trying to keep water flowing down the ditches, treating water, and then moving water through our different interties that we have throughout the whole systems that we have. Hundreds of USA tickets were generated for all departments that they had to go mark to get new poles put in the ground. A lot of generators were moved around multiple times, fueling. just keep the treatment plants going, hydro stations. So everybody just did a very, very good job with everybody that was involved with this. So it's a big thank you to everybody with that. And the other thing I was going to talk about on page 7 of the ops report is just some of the work that's going on at Sonora Water Treatment Plant. In the pictures you guys have in your packet there, you see that they drain the said basin. We're patching holes, and the reason they're patching the holes there is the water is short circuiting through the said basin, not following the channels that it needs to. And when it doesn't, when it short circuits, it's dirty and it loads the filters up, and then they have to backwash more frequently to treat the water correctly. So that's about it that I have on the ops report, unless anybody has any questions.
Are there any questions? Oh, go ahead, Director Ringen. Sorry, Corey.
Yeah, thank you. I'll make this really quick. I don't have any real questions. I just want to really commend staff, the crews. I read every word in that ops report. It was very thorough. I was blown away by how much work got done this last month with all the bad weather and things that you folks had to put up with. Just, it's amazing. And this is probably one of the best ops reports I've seen. So anyway, good job. Keep it up. Real proud of the whole bunch of you. Thank you.
Corey, any other comments?
Not that is being indicated, no.
Thank you. Any members of the public wish to comment?
Not at the moment, no.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, thank you, Eric. This was great. This is a great administrative record of the accomplishments as well. It's a good, it's like a journal. Thank you.
It is, yes.
Yeah, great. Well, this is informational only, so we appreciate this, and there's no voting on this, so we will then move to our staff report with the wastewater treatment, I believe, progress report. Melissa, will you please read item number 6?
Okay, Sonora Regional Wastewater Treatment Project Monthly Progress Report.
All right, very well. Amidst dealing with disasters, as Eric just described, in the day-to-day operations, your staff's working very hard to build a new wastewater treatment facility. It is the largest capital project this district's ever undertaken. And as such, we felt like it was probably worth a monthly update to your board. If nothing else, to give you a brief overview of kind of where the contractor sits in terms of progress, where we're at in terms of budget. We do not want any surprises for your board as we get to the finish line of an 18-month to 24-month project. With that said, I'm gonna turn it over to Jennifer in just a moment, but I do want to recognize a couple key staff that are involved in this, and we won't do this every month, but since this is the first report, Jennifer, obviously she's our project manager. I'd say probably about 75% of her time is now dedicated exclusively to this project. She's on site with our inspector a couple days, 2.5 days a week. And Cindy Schlenz, she's our new engineering coordinator. She helps us pay invoices and do tracking and prepare this progress report. Of course, Steve and his crew, without them, none of the money would be moved around, and that's quite an endeavor because the contractor submits pay requests. They then need to go to the inspector. They then need to go to the engineer. They then need to go to the district. They then need to go to USDA and then come back to us, so that Steve and his crew can make sure timely payment is made. And then, of course, our operations staff, specifically Michelle Perkins and Jeremy Heister, they're dealing with the day-to-day disruption of having a large contractor in all facets of the plant site, digging through things and And so we're very appreciative of their patience. At the end of this road, there'll be something for them to be proud of, at least we hope. So at this point, I think Jennifer has the presentation. She'll just share screen real quick.
Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint?
I can, but we can see like 3 windows. Yeah, they're.
What about
you're
now?
in, you might go to the yeah, we can see it, but I think you're in presenter mode.
I am. Well, my other screen shows the what I want to show you. I don't know how to move it to that other screen.
Jennifer, at the top, click display settings, and it should be swap.
Oop. How's that?
Perfect.
That work?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. That's exactly it. Okay, yeah. So like what Erik mentioned, we're going to start doing these. Our intent is to do them monthly and give you guys a kind of overview of what happened over the last month. This progress report is going to capture everything that we've done since October 18th, which is our notice to proceed date. So we're going to get a couple months into this one, and then from here on out, we'll do monthly reports. So we'll move on. We're going to keep this slide in the presentation every month, and you'll start slowly seeing everything in progress, and eventually everything will have a green check mark as marked as complete. So right now we are working in the existing Pond 3 area. It was dewatered, and it's been excavated. We're working on the east and west clarifiers over the past several months, getting those excavated, putting in the rebar, and then placing the concrete for the slabs and the footing. They've installed some of the piping that's underneath these slabs. So right now in the rainy season, although it hasn't been terribly rainy, this is all that they're going to be working on until drier weather, and they'll move on to the building. So our funding sources is a combination of TUD ratepayer funds, a USDA loan, and a USDA grant, and it has to be taken in order of TUD's money has to be spent first, then the loan, and at the very end we can dip into the grant. So our money that we're putting in is about 8.8 million. The loan is about 25 million, and the grant that we get at the very end is about $8.5 million. And we are currently at about $5 million spent on the whole project, which is about 13% of the total budget. And then those costs can be broken down into legal, environmental, engineering services, construction, special inspections, bond counsel, financing, and contingencies. And so far, we've paid out about $3.5 million in just the construction portion of that. So that roughly represents about 11% of our contract with Hewitt. Engineering, that's our engineer PACE, that's their services, and also includes our inspection services. Special inspections are things like maybe welding or concrete, things other than what our resident project representative is doing for us. So Condor has been selected, and we have an agreement with Condor for them to do that work. Although they've done some of the work, it has not been billed yet. You'll see it at the next progress report. Okay, so our construction in progress for October, November, we excavated the east and west clarifiers. In November and December, we installed the clarifier rebar. We did the underpiping that goes out from underneath the clarifiers, and the footing of the clarifier was formed and poured. December and January, Hewitt received a large majority of their pipe. They're still waiting on fittings but the pipe is now delivered on site. We also got an easement from the city of Sonora to capture the new sewer line that's coming from our existing sewer into the new plant. We needed another easement for that. So they happily gave that to us. And then we placed concrete for the slabs, and they did that over the course of 2 days, two long days of concrete placement. All in all, it's about 450 cubic yards of concrete so far, and they haven't even started on the walls yet. So these clarifiers take the most concrete on the whole job. So in the next 3 months, Hewitt's going to be forming and placing the clarifier walls. So if you drive past the site today, you'll see that some of the form work has gone up, and the rebar cage is being installed now, and then they're going to place concrete early February. They're going to start building those walls in 8 sections. And next, after that, or somewhat concurrently with that, with a different crew, they're going to be putting in the emergency storage basin under drain line. So our new emergency storage basin is going to be lined, and we are going to have a drain line that goes underneath that basin, to where if we see anything dripping out of this this drain line, we'll know that there's a leak in the liner. So they're installing that. Hope is that it always remains dry, but it's an indicator if there is a problem. It's one way for us to tell. And then what we're going to be working on very soon is sludge removal out of the first pond, which is the one farthest away from the highway. We're going to be moving all of the water back over into pond 2 and start cleaning that pond out, so that they can start moving dirt and filling in that pond, so that they can start building the building. Let me go back.
Director Boatwright has his hand up for a comment. I don't know if it's too early to address or if you want to wait till the end.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning.
I thought the emergency storage basin under drain line was for groundwater control, not leak detection.
What do you mean by groundwater control?
As far as any groundwater that would try to surface under the basin. Pond A, typically took on groundwater during or had some influence of groundwater during wet seasons, during wet years.
David, you're correct. It serves both purposes, actually. We have an underdrain system under the biolac basins and an underdrain system under the emergency storage basin. They will detect if there's leakage through testing, right, to see if it's wastewater that's leaking. But they're also for groundwater, and so we don't get any pressure on the liner pushing up.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't understand your question at first. I understand now. Just some fast facts on the project is actually when we did this presentation, we put it together, we had 140 completed submittals. We're in just a few short days, we're already at about 170 now. Our 80 reviewed RFIs, that number is closer to 90 now. Have had 0 safety incidents. I will say that Hewitt, as far as their safety goes, from what I've seen, they are top notch, and I'm very impressed with them. We could all take lessons from them, and I can't say that their safety has just been really on point. I can't say that enough. The percentage of construction that's complete as far as dollar value goes is 11%, and we are currently on budget. And then just wanted to provide some pictures. So the first picture is when they excavated down that's the east clarifier. We encountered a lot of groundwater there, so they had to continuously pump. At the bottom of that picture, you can kind of see some hoses coming up from out of the excavations area. They pumped and pumped and pumped and pumped all the way through concrete placement of the slabs, and because there's just the water just kept coming in. So now that we've placed the slabs, we do not need to pump anymore. The middle picture is just showing the rebar installation on the east clarifier. And then the last picture, you could really see that rebar mat on the slab, and they're installing what's called water stop, and you install water stop at concrete joints. On the top left is another picture of the rebar mat and the starter walls. So the wood that's shown there is they're forming the starter wall. They pour a small section of the wall just to get going as they place concrete for the slab. The middle picture is the concrete placement of the east clarifier. So you can see there's a pump truck with a long hose that goes all the way to the far side of the slab there, and a lot of the crew members in there smoothing it out. Then the very last picture is Condor Earth Technologies performing concrete slump test. So the concrete, not every truck is tested. So randomly, we'll have them test trucks. Out of 22 trucks, we might test 5 for slump. And that is all I have for pictures. I did share with the board drone photos. So hopefully you guys were able to access those and enjoy those. And I guess I'll leave that. If you guys have any questions.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. That was a really cool PowerPoint. That was those fast facts, that was pretty good. Of course, it's nice to see that it's within budget, it's on time and in budget. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other, go ahead, sorry.
I was just said you're welcome.
Good. Any other comments from the board? Do you see any comments, Corey?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, and any from the public?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, again, that was really great. And this is informational only, so we appreciate that. And no action is taken at this time. So thank you again. And with that, I believe that concludes our regular business. So we will move into staff reports.
Thanks. All right, I'll go first. Let's see, we've attended a couple of Phoenix relicensing stakeholder meetings, and that's going as well as can be expected. Nothing really to report there, just that's ongoing and many more meetings to come. Erik and I and others met with Mueller Mutual recently to continue discussion about a fossil consolidation project with them, and I don't know if Erik will have any more on that, but it's progressing. It's been ongoing for a number of years. They're basically waiting for funding, I think. President Bale and I did Mueller's Views taping, and that should be airing this weekend. And Barbara and I had a good time together. I think we did well, and I'm really happy that I got to do that with you, Barbara. And then today I have a City of Sonora oversight meeting, so I'll be attending that today. And that's it for me.
Any other staff like to go?
We have Steve with. Yep.
I'll go ahead and do next. I'll be brief. Like I've done before, I'm going to continue every opportunity we meet with the board to remind you of upcoming events that you may hear about. At our previous meeting, we talked about effective December 31st, the governor's moratorium on water shutoffs for non-payment for residential customers has expired. We are actively notifying customers, reaching out to customers, and we're going to work through a period of time before we actually start that. But Lisa has added something to the front page of our website describing that this is coming. When we sent out our courtesy notices this week, we changed the language to address in there payment plans are available. There's still community assistance programs that are out there, but we will be reinstituting our turnoff procedures, and we'll also be reinstituting our late payment. So eventually the board members may hear about in the community. Again, this is just a follow-up on what I brought to your attention before. At this point, it's timed out for probably about mid-March before we actually begin the process, and we'll work through each of the 4 different billing cycles as we go. But just to reiterate, we've updated our courtesy notices during the collection procedures. We're informing the customers that this is coming. It's on the website as well there. So kind of on track with what we had previously discussed and making every effort. Again, we don't want to shut people off, but we need people to start paying again after the long COVID exception and more of what I described to you previously. So thank you.
We have Eric Johnson with his hand up for comment.
Just want to report to the board. I'll elaborate on what Don mentioned with Muller Mutual and potential consolidation. They're working with Blackwater engineers on an application for construction funding that would bring their system up to standard, where then it could be consolidated with the district. So there's more to come on that front, and it will take some time. But as you heard, money and infrastructure is really a priority now. And so I think the time is right for them to undertake that effort. Also, Don and I and Erik, I think, was involved as well, had a nice conversation with the county, specifically related to roads and paving and coordination. So I think the communication lines are open. On that same subject, Curtis Creek Elementary School and the water main, grant-funded water main down there, we're working closely with the county to make sure that our project goes in before they do paving later this year, and the timelines are lining up well. We opened bids last week, and we received 5 bids, so it was competitive, but the bid amounts ranged from about 2.2 million down to 1.3 million. The 1.3 million is within our budget. So we will be looking to come to the board with a request to award contract later in February. But one takeaway here, last thing to note is just a few years ago, we used to use a rule of thumb of about $10 a diameter inch for cost estimating of pipelines. So what that means is if it's an 8-inch diameter pipeline times 10, $80 a foot. Obviously, there's nuances and specifics for each project, but what we're seeing now is $16. The average of the 5 bids we saw before was about $16 a diameter inch. So tremendous cost escalation. Hopefully it will level out, but I just want the board to be aware that those bids are coming in quite high.
Okay.
Go ahead, Abby.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just giving an update on our communications consultant, Raptelis, who's doing outreach for us. You should have all received an email from Matt Wittern from Raptelis to schedule a time to talk with him about your thoughts about water rights. And so if you haven't received an email from him, please let us know so that we can get you scheduled for that time with him. So the process is rolling. We have a staff check-in meeting with Raptelis on Thursday. And so things are moving along as scheduled, as the board saw in the proposal with Raptelis. So happy to hear that. And they're very responsive and doing a good job from what we can tell thus far. So thank you all for getting back to Lisa and Matt on that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Corey, do you see any other hands up from staff?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move to directors' communications and reports. Is there a director that would like to go next?
Director Ryan has his hand up for comment.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to thank Jennifer Batt for a really great report on the wastewater project. Having been in construction as many years as I've been, I was pretty impressed with what's going on down there. I love the pictures. On 113, the City of Sonora EAP Committee, Energy Action Plan. I've been going to these meetings for numerous years now, and I've been complaining, why are we not getting anything done? And we're not accomplishing anything. And I don't like meetings to have meetings, just to have meetings. So at any rate, I finally stepped up to the plate and suggested that we start performing energy assessment inspections of various businesses and in Sonora and other buildings. And so we had our first shakedown energy assessment inspection at the SRT. They have 4 buildings out there, and Charles Segerstrom is real involved not only in the committee but also in SRT, and Segerstrom also accompanied us, and we went through 2 of the buildings, and so that's where I was for a good portion of the morning on 13th. I think it'll work out really well. That was, like I say, a shakedown cruise, so I'm going to put together a final inspection sheet so that we can do this in a methodical way for different businesses that want it. The beauty of this, that what it has to do with TUD, is we're also looking for water savings, because that's also energy. So that's included in on that. On 118, attended and participated in the TUD EN2 kickoff meeting. That was real interesting. That's for our new project that's just getting underway. 120, attended and participated in the Mountain Counties Water Resource Association Legislative Committee meeting. We haven't met in probably well over 2 years. Kind of came to a grinding halt when John Kingsbury was looking to retire. And I am the chairman of that committee, and I've been insisting that I want to hear from the Mountain Counties board as to what it is exactly that our committee can provide them with that will help them do their job, as well as the GMs of the various utilities. So we're working on that. We had our first stand it back up and get operational meeting, and we're laying out the rules, and it'll be going to the board for their input here pretty quick. On 121, I had my initial phone meeting with Matt from Raftelis. We really didn't cover anything other than just fluff. So I have another meeting with him this next week, and I guess it's going to be a good hour-and-a-half ordeal. He says he's got a ton of questions he's going to ask. So I don't know whether I'm looking forward to that or not, but I'm certainly going to try and have a good attitude, because it's about a good thing. So anyway, that's it for me.
Thanks, Ron. Any other director have anything to report? And I have nothing to report. Okay, then Corey, do you see Director Boatwright's hand up at all?
It is not, no.
Okay, thank you. All right, well then, that concludes this portion of our meeting. And and then we will recess into closed session. And before that, would you guys all like to take about a 15-minute break once I close this meeting off? Director Ringen, your hand is up.
Thank you. I would, I've got a real issue with both those items that are in closed session. In my memory, neither one of those have gone through committee. And there's been no real public input on either one of those. And to take it one step further, I don't want to get into the details on them, but
Director Ringen, excuse me. I think we should be talking about, Jesse, chime in here, please. Okay, if a director has a concern like Director Ringen, should we wait until we're in closed session to listen to this? I mean, it's important, but I'm concerned that it's a closed session item and we're talking in public.
Yeah, I was waiting to see if Director Ringen is obviously aware it's closed session. I didn't think he was going to share anything that would that was confidential and not meant to be public. It sounded like he was concerned about whether or not they should even be on the agenda and whether or not they went through committee.
that is absolutely correct. And I was not going to share one item that would have been closed session. I just wanted to give my basic reasons why I think that the closed session should not occur today, that these two things should go back to the committees for open and for first committee discussion and public input, and then to a full board vote. And then it can go to closed session if that's what the board decides to do. But, and I was going to give a reason why I felt that way on both of them. And it has to do with the fact that I went on tours of both of those sites with staff. And I had objections to what was going to be discussed in closed session at that time, and I gave good concrete reasons why I felt that way, and here they are in closed session. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, let's do, my suggestion then is, because I am not quite sure what the specific objections are, let's be careful and let's hear those objections in closed session, President Balin.
And then the board at that time then can decide to go back, put these items back into, as Director Ring is requesting, into a committee.
Committee or open session, but let's hear these concerns and in abundance of caution, let's hear the concerns in closed session.
Okay, thank you. And then okay, thanks. All right, is that okay with you, Director Ringen? Or we'll take this up in closed session some more?
Well, not really, but I mean, Jesse is the legal advisor here. Number two is that then it all gets discussed. The reasons, my objections, my reasons are all going to be done behind closed doors, closed session, and it cannot be repeated to the public. That doesn't solve the problem at all.
Well, in closed session, though, the board can consent, correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse, to have these items go through committee process.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I'm still I'm uncertain why the concerns necessarily need to be heard in open session. Only Director Ringen knows what they are. So So again, I think just out of an abundance of caution, let's hear the concerns in closed session. And if the board agrees, they can be taken off closed session, will go to committee, they'll be discussed in open session, or maybe they won't come back at all, frankly. The point is to, under these closed sessions, is to have a confidential discussion over the possible acquisition of these pieces of property. That's no secret. That's why they're listed. And let's learn more about his concerns in closed session and see if they were inappropriately placed in closed session.
Thank you. So with that, let's adjourn into closed session, but let's first take a 15-minute break. And I'm right now closing off the public portion of the meeting, and we will return at, I guess it would be 10 minutes to 12. Oh.
Director Kearns has his hand up for a comment.
I'll reserve my comment until you have Melissa read the items, and then I'll comment then. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't quite catch that.
What Director Kearns had asked is that the items have not yet been read by Melissa, and public comment has not yet been solicited. So we might want to do that before the recess, and then once we start in recess, we'll start in closed session.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for the reminder. I appreciate that. Melissa, will you please read the two items to be discussed in closed session, please?
Okay, item A, conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, property APN 059-580-002, agency negotiators Don Perkins, Erik Johnson, other party to negotiations Mike McCabe, Mill Villa, MHC, LLC, under negotiation, price and terms of payment. Item B, conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, property APN 083-200-002-000, agency negotiators Don Perkins, Erik Johnson, other party to negotiations Christopher Hatler, under negotiation, price and terms of payment.
Thank you, Melissa. Go ahead, Director Kearns.
Okay, big surprise here, but I'm gonna have to recuse myself from item B only. I'll be there for item A, but not item B. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey, is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on these closed session items?
Not that I see at the moment, no.
Okay, thank you. Then with that, we will then move into closed session with a
President Balin, you're on mute if there you. Yep.
Thank you. I can't tell if Director Boatwright is here or not. But
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to reconvene into open session. I'd like to state for the record that Director Jeff Kearns recused himself at 1 o'clock and was not in attendance when the board was in discussion regarding Roman numeral 6, small b. And so he had left the meeting at 1. And so with that, I'd like to disclose that there was no reportable action at this time. And with that, that concludes our meeting, and it is adjourned at 1:12 p.m.
Thank you all.
All right.